Mental Training 101 on 105.5 The Roar. And now back to Get Warrior Tough with Andrew Wittman.
Man, I was listening to that. Yeah, Jack was fading out the music. I'm listening to it. All right, so back to Get Warrior Tough. I love the bumper music, right? So the most monumental hour in media anywhere. We are leadership and mental toughness coaches, Andrew Wittman and Dutch Coleman. And Jack Wittman is riding sidekick here. He's running the board for us. So I just want to give Jack a shout out. Tell him thank you for all of his hard work every week. And so I want you to tell everybody hi.
Hi.
All right, I got you on there. They're good. All right. So, we're going to start talking. Dutch, I want to get into this thing about out of the Sports Illustrated. I sent you the article. Did you get a chance to look at it?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so here the article is entitled Abuse of Power by Alexander Wolf and with reporting by Lauren Shute. And so the question was why do college coaches continue to yell, demean, and demoralize? That's yesterday's tactic. Today's athletes can't and won't take it. What's more, it doesn't work. Study after study shows the benefits of a more positive approach. All right, Dutch, let's jump into this. We started talking about it last week before this article ever came out, so I don't want to say that we gave him any ideas to go do his work, because I'm sure he did his research before we came on the scene, but we are on the cutting edge.
You know, I will say this, and we'll get into the meat, but I want to go on record when we first start off. It says today's athletes can't and won't take it. I disagree with that, and we're going to talk more about that. But I want to say that that's not the point. It's not the point that they can't and won't take it, because we were talking Fred Taylor's son. We talked about the Jim McElwain situation from last week. The Taylor kid took it.
He sure did. He took it and went right back to work, man.
It went right back to work. So
and he
this
didn't
is
tweet
less about
it. Yep.
Because what they want us to do, Wittman, is look at these kids and say, "Oh, these kids are soft now. These kids are this." It's not about that, because the kids their coach is yelling right now as we speak. Somebody's having a nighttime practice, or somebody's having a practice on the West Coast right now, and they're yelling. And it's a very good football team, or it's a very bad football team, and they're yelling right now. And those kids are going to work and they're doing their thing. So it's not about that. It's more about the information, the studies that we're going to talk about, that tells us the results of it. But the kids are taking it. There's no question about that.
Right. And I can we just kind of, I want to, on the front end of this, let's separate out yelling from abuse.
Absolutely.
That's two different things, man. See, my drill instructors yelled at me. They did not abuse me. Now, they did hit me a few times, but it was only to keep me alive in combat. Now, I'm serious about that. And they would tell me that. I had this senior drill instructor, and he told me, he said, hey, you're going to wish, there's going to be days while you're out there, you're going to wish you were back in boot camp, and you're going to wish that you were here with me. And he was absolutely 100% right, because there was safety there, there's comfort there, and I still hear my drill instructor's voice in my self-talk that gets me to move from point A to point B. When it gets really, really hard, I hear his voice still to this day, and he wasn't talking nice and sweet nothings. He was yelling, but it was not tearing me down. It was exhortative, it was informative, it was motivating, and it was to reach down and get me to refocus my emotional driver and get to work.
Amen.
So I want to say that up front. Yelling is not being abused, and these studies are about abuse, not yelling. So let's just, you know what I mean? I want to kind of say that, because even though that McElwain dude was yelling, there's a lot of stuff that these coaches are doing in this study had anything to do with yelling. It was with when people got hurt.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you said that, because we don't want to turn into a discussion as anyone get afraid of getting yelled at. I yell. I coach extensively, and I yell extensively.
Me too. I love it.
Yeah, I think you got to yell effectively.
Right.
I think when you're yelling just to yell, and you're yelling and you're losing the audience, then it really doesn't matter. And when you get to the point where, people don't complain when you're yelling effectively. People complain when you're yelling ineffectively.
Right.
Because if you're yelling ineffectively, they're complaining because they don't get why you're yelling.
Yeah, it's just you lost your mind and you're just right.
Exactly. If you're yelling effectively, they're taking it and they're doing something with it because they're hearing you in your yelling. But there's a lot of people that are yelling and nobody's hearing them and nobody wants to hear them. Those are the ones that are probably more apt to be abusive than the ones that are effectively yelling.
Right. So here in this study, they gathered data from 20,000 college athletes from the NCAA. So 20,000. athletes. They also studied 54,000 undergraduates, with 7.5% of them were varsity athletes. So they combined these two studies, okay? And the results, this is what it says. The results make explicit both the extent of abusive coaching and the fragility of athletes being abused. In Division I, 31% of men's basketball players and 22% of football players reported that a coach puts me down in front of others, and only 39% of women's basketball players strongly agree that my head coach can be trusted. Even more alarming, athletes have never been more psychologically vulnerable, reflecting a trend among all college students. The assessment found that 41% of athletes felt so depressed that it was difficult to function. 52% felt overwhelming anxiety, with the figures for women jumping from 45 to 59 respectively. Further, 14% of athletes said they had seriously considered suicide, and 6% attempted it. So here's the thing, is, and what I know about cognitive neuroscience, that if you're operating out of fear or anxiety and that moves into depression, half your brain shuts down, and it's the creative problem-solving half of your brain. It's because you go into fight, flight, or freeze. And so now they're kind of soft-pedaling this, but if you read some of these stories, it was like one guy, he was like, had to wear the opposing, whatever, he was a starting tackle.
Yeah.
He got hurt, and he wasn't gold bricking. I mean, he had a long track record of playing well. He didn't want to be hurt, but the coach is punishing him by making him wear the uniform of whoever they're playing and have to stand on the sideline during practice and wear that uniform.
And, besides the fact that's ineffective, it's downright dumb. I mean, can you, even in your idiocy as a coach, can you come up with something better than that? I mean, really, is that what you're doing to make a point? I mean, I'm sitting there reading some of this stuff, and I'm like, these guys are clueless as leaders, because this doesn't help the kid or the team. This doesn't teach the kid any lessons at all. This is only meant to do one thing: humiliate the kid.
Yeah, and for what?
And if you're the leader of the team, and I'm trying to get the kid to understand something, then I'm trying to come up with something to help him understand what I'm trying to get across. And humiliating him doesn't help him understand what I'm trying to teach him. If I'm trying to teach him anything about injuries or sacrificing for the team, making him dress in the other team's uniform doesn't do that.
No, so I don't. Yeah, I totally don't even get that. What is the point?
No, and where's the challenge for the coaches to come up with something to teach these young people what they need them to know, what they need them to get out of this? Come up with something like that if you want to impress me, Coach. Now, if that's something that's tough, if it's something hard, but it's teaching the lesson, if you think he's jaking it on injuries, then if I can see the message that you're giving him, then he can probably see the message and he can probably learn something from him. That is nothing but humiliating. That is abuse. That's embarrassing in front of everyone. And he's not learning. He's not getting anything from it.
No, he's just disengaging. All right, so listen. So in 2013, Georgetown University Medical Center, they did a study of 117 current and 163 former Division I athletes that suffered from depression. So all these, so they had current and about an even split. The researchers expected the ex-athletes to be more susceptible to the depression as they navigated the transition from the spotlight. So they're leaving the spotlight, they didn't make it to the next level, and now they have to go back to regular life. Instead, what the study found was that depression was more than twice as common among active athletes than those who had already finished their college careers.
Oh, and some people are sitting there. I know right now somebody out there is thinking it didn't used to be that way. Now, this is something my dad told me a long time ago. There's nothing new under the sun.
Right.
The only thing we do is we find out about stuff that was already there.
Yep.
We're not discovering new stuff. We're discovering from the standpoint of we're finding out that it was happening or that it is happening, not that it's this newly created phenomenon of athletes being depressed, because long ago they were getting humiliated and depressed, and it was affecting the people back then too, and they just dug it deep down inside them, and it came out, manifested itself in other ways. So this isn't anything new. So if you're out there thinking that, stop it right now.
Right,
we're just finding new ways to discover it.
That's right, and it's not even about the. I'm just saying it like this: it's not just athletes. We've seen it in veterans too. Soldiers committing suicide. This happens in the workplace as well, and so. Just listen to kind of where this thing goes, and this translates into everyday life for everybody. Okay, so during this study, they'd introduced the concept of threat rigidity. They called it, and it's an instinctive response of leaders When they become to a tight spot, they get defensive and reactive, and they revert to their old and discredited ways of doing things, right? So when the pressure's dialed up for the leader, and so I don't want to point fingers at just them because this is what happens to any of us would do. When we get squeezed, whatever's in here the most, inside ourselves the most, comes out. It comes flying out. Whatever's in your heart most will come flying out of your mouth. And so if you're freaking out, that's going to come flying out. So it's threat rigidity, okay? So here's a coaching rule of thumb, and for leaders, we should do this. Be demanding but not demeaning. There's a 5-to-1 ratio. There's 5 instances of encouragement to 1 instant of criticism. And I even hate the word criticism. I'll use the word course correction. So 5-to-1 ratio of encouragement to course correction. That should be our rule of thumb as leaders, because people get depressed. If all you do is get beat down and you get beat down and you get beat down. Remember we talked about employee disengagement a few weeks ago, and this is what the athletes do too. That guy that's sitting on the sideline with the uniform of the opposing team, he's disengaging. And then he's anxious and depressed. That leads down to, shutting half your brain down, employee disengagement, or an athlete being disengaged. And this is what happens in the workplace too. And then we get to the point where you don't know what that activating event is, and it may lead to suicide or workplace violence. It just is what it is. I mean, I could start listing. This article lists people that, just a couple years, was it like last year, the year before, there was an Ohio State football player who was also a wrestler, committed suicide.
And the thing that the real problem lies in is that as a leader, what do I want? I want to win. Whatever the game is, whatever the goal is, whether it's sales, marketing, engineering, I want to win. So this information is crucial to me because it's going to help me win. If I'm trying to be effective, then I need to listen to this because I'm trying to win. And so I like your term better I like the course correction better than criticism. Because if I'm really doing a really good course correction, I can do as many of those as possible.
Right.
I can do 5 course corrections to 1 encouragement, because if I'm course correcting in a professional manner, then that's what they want.
It should be encouraging.
Exactly. I'm trying to get this thing right. Hey man, your backhand is doing this, man. You need let's work on it. If I'm going, hey man, your backhand stinks. You can't do this. You can't do that, man. Get out of here. No, I need to be like, hey man, your backhand's off tilted. You need to do this. Get your elbow into it. Turn your wrist. There needs to be as many course corrections as possible. If you're course correcting. Now, if you're yelling and screaming and you're not correcting anything, then you're not helping the team. You're not helping yourself as a leader. I need you to perform. That's what leaders need to understand, is that you need them to perform. And yelling and demeaning and screaming and all that is fine if you're doing some course correction. If you're yelling and screaming and to no end, then you lose and they lose. The problem is they lose in a tougher fashion than you. You cited the suicide, the impact of suicide, workplace violence, all those things. So they're losing at a much higher peril when you're just losing the game.
Exactly. And this guy, Jim Thompson, he was the founder of the Positive Coaching Alliance. He's out there at Stanford Business School. He says this: if you want to get their best performance, just to key off of what you just said, to get the best out of every person, to get the best performance, the best way to do that is create a positive culture in which they are respected and believe in their value, and that the coach believes in them. The idea of the all-knowing coach who has lots of power and uses it in a way that we now call bullying, that was kind of the norm back in the day. But all the research shows that this isn't the best way to get the best out of your people. We got to go to break. Dutch, I want to hear exactly what you think right after we get back.
A company that has happy employees will be more effective. A company that has employees that know how to deal with obstacles and problems will make more money. A company that gives their employees the tools to make those things happen is the company that turns to Andrew Wittman. Andrew has been teaching leadership, performance discipline, emotional intelligence, critical thinking, and mental toughness for almost 30 years. He's a veteran with combat experience in the Marines and experience as a police officer, federal agent, and security contractor for the State Department. His keynote speeches, half-day and full-day seminars are engaging, effective, and energizing. Your employees will leave feeling empowered. They'll learn how to foster better communication, build strong working relationships, develop crisis and conflict management skills, and more. Visit GetWarriorTough.com to read testimonials from people just like you. GetWarriorTough.com.